Dan, happy Clean Air Month.
Happy Clean Air Month, Jim.
I'm so glad you could join me for this discussion on where we are with clean air in California. Dan is the executive director of the Los Angeles American Cancer Society, and he is going to discuss what they're doing as far as making people more aware of the health impacts of air pollution and air toxins. And that is what Healthy Air Alliance does too. We want to make sure people understand what is going on in their air that is affecting their lives, the quality of their lives, and what more we can do to clean our air sooner. So, Dan, when we think about clean air these days, I can't help but think of the pandemic, and it means so many different things to many people. I hope your family is safe and you are safe as well.
Thank you, Jim. Absolutely, we've gotten through our vaccinations and doing what we can to keep safe, and hope wishing you well. Likewise.
Yeah, I've gotten my vaccinations, and the vaccination process has also shown health equity issues throughout California. And that, again, is all the intersectionality of when we have a problem, how do we deal with it in California the most equitable way, making sure that the past structures don't affect how people today get access to health or clean air. Um, what we also experienced during the COVID pandemic period was it's hard to believe that a year ago there was almost no traffic on the roads and the air seemed almost clear. How did you experience that part of our pandemic experience?
No, it was definitely that eerie calm. The year of the zombie apocalypse, where the streets were empty, and a lot of cars off the road. We did notice ozone layer had an uptick in the LA area, which was interesting. There was an article referenced in the LA Times about that. And in either case, whether it's diesel particulates or ozone ways that were keeping concerned and raising awareness about things like skin cancers, lung cancer, and just how our bodies are impacted by what's in the air, really at any given time, and Los Angeles definitely in particular.
One of the most surprising studies that came out was from Harvard at the beginning of the pandemic that showed that areas that had higher pollution concentrations also had higher rates of COVID. So that communities that were suffering from air pollution also had the double burden of also being exposed at a higher rate or being more susceptible when exposed to COVID. So that we see that when one problem is occurring in a community like air pollution, it opens up to so many other factors that affect health. What other factors have you seen where air pollution is more in a community that people suffer?
Right. Well, certainly we know to be true that zip code is a greater risk factor than genetic code when it comes to cancer diagnosis, and not surprisingly, when you're looking at viruses as well. Noting that cancer is a disease while COVID-19 is a virus, both of these have very detrimental effects on the body. And when you look at communities that are in disadvantaged neighborhoods, often their access to resources or their access to food, access to green space, the proximity of trees, which are the lungs of the earth, absolutely have an effect on a person's health and ability to resist whatever the toxins are that they're exposed to.
More people seem to be aware of the other impact on community health from air pollution, and has been a real source of new legislation and investment in these communities. It's asthma. Now, asthma might not necessarily be a part of the American Cancer Society's focus, but what is your experience also on this level?
Well, certainly we're in an area where we look to cancer as a chronic disease, and in that vein, you look to other diseases like diabetes and asthma that have long-term damaging effects. Asthma, for sure, affects people in their vulnerable stages, which is typically for a normal person. When you're young, your body's still developing, your organs are developing, and when you're elder, when your immunity system is declining, a little bit compromised, And certainly it's during those developmental stages where air toxins have a proven lasting damaging effect, where chronic asthma can lead to COPD. And we see some direct correlation with pollution and unfortunately kids with schools built near freeways that are heavily exposed. And then these are often in communities of color. So now we're having a racist undertone where you have kids with asthma with limited resources being exposed to toxins, where other kids from more affluent neighborhoods might have a lower risk. And that's unfortunately a truth that we see.
Yeah, and as I was saying, during the first part of COVID, it seemed like the air might be a little cleaner by us reducing the way we get around town throughout California, but it turned out to be a very small percentage reduction, and it might have had some other effects that we experienced from weather being colder, less sunlight. But what we're trying to see right now is, like, there is planning going on in California to improve the air. California has made great strides. We have the California Environmental Protection Agency and the California Air Resources Board putting together plans they've been implementing for decades now to maximize the amount of technology to clean the air and also to be cost effective. Um, this year has been actually very much producing many milestones, and a lot of them have to do with zero emission vehicles. Uh, have you been following those news updates?
Yeah, certainly. I guess taking a step back, there's the linkages between health and the environment have improved over the years. Our recognition that they are one and the same. And when you're looking to do policy measures in communities or at statewide or national levels, it's really because of our children, our families, that we need to be making these decisions, and not just because of the ambiance and kind of the classical beauty that people attribute to nature. And absolutely, the emissions in the air, California is certainly a commuter culture, and what they're trying to do and looks like increasingly successful is what it sounds like with zero emissions and emissions reductions for vehicles. Will absolutely be something that will help us in terms of lowering the amount of toxins in the air that people will be exposed to.
Yeah, the Healthy Air Alliance is looking at scientific-based ways to achieve measurable results. And the purpose, as you outlined, is, yes, pollution is killing the planet, but it's also poisoning people, and we have to keep putting people first. And when we say people, we're talking about all Californians, and especially those who have been historically overburdened for the variety of reasons that you explained. So when we see progress, we want to make sure that it's done to also right past wrongs. But one of the things that the governor in California has done this year through an executive order has set new targets for zero emission vehicles. And it's very exciting. By 2035, all new sales of vehicles in California will be zero emission vehicles. And they're working on plans to make those percentages ratchet up as we get there, so that we continuously improve on the number of electric vehicles. And of course, that's going to need a lot of new infrastructure. So there's new legislation focusing on how to implement new chargers. And of course, make sure the distribution of those are taking into account disadvantaged communities where they may not have access and may not be able to afford it. So it's transforming rebate programs so that maybe no longer Tesla drivers will get rebates, but it will go to communities that really need it more. And the Cars for All program are fully funded so that people with old cars who can't afford new lower emission vehicles are able to participate in the solution of cleaning their air in their communities. So it's very exciting. So, yeah.
Yeah, and just something of note, the 2035 goal, or the executive order that the Governor Newsom has put into place parallels. We actually have our own 2035 goal to reduce cancer mortality by 40%. And we're sure to understand that these are interconnected in terms of pollution reduction. And you bring up a good point about access, because it's one thing to have opportunities to improve upon our lifestyles and healthy living choices, but the access to these options, if they're not accessible due to price, if there's vehicles that are created but they're not in areas where people can even go to purchase them, or where to transition their old vehicles. A lot of that you're talking about is absolutely part of that conversation. Transportation is next to finance, the number one reason why people don't receive cancer care. And so certainly we look to transportation decisions and ways that we can improve public transportation, better private transportation, and shared options, so that our communities can just function better.
Yeah, transportation is such a key in California for health equity and for air pollution. In California, the transportation sector accounts for over 50% of the toxins in our air, from greenhouse gases to benzene and other additives into gasoline and diesel. So anything that affects transportation that reduces our dependency on fossil fuels is a great advancement. So the more options that people have for mobility, that they don't need to get into a vehicle, could be land use, it could be light rail, it could be shared vehicles. All these things help reduce vehicle miles traveled and the overall pollution in our area that we're breathing and affecting us. Also, the governor, in his executive order, created the the Clean Truck Act. And so that by 2045 will create zero emission trucking. And trucking in California, although the number of vehicles overall is a small percentage, it has an amazing amount of pollution generation, especially diesel and particulate matters that have a outweighed effect on the detrimental effects on people's health. Can you explain diesel and the issues around health issues that you've experienced?
Well, great. Yeah, you bring up 2 points about diesel in particular. The World Health Organization and EPA and others have noted diesel as carcinogenic. There are a lot of factors into how toxins are into the air, and we are seeing even more recent studies showing evidence of a stronger correlation between how diesel is impacting the body. And when we talk about cancer as a chronic disease, we're talking about people living with immunosuppressed abilities to counteract toxins in the air. So if you have populations, a rising number of people living with cancer or diabetes, we know that obesity is on the rise in the US, and that's going to mean more diabetes and other types of chronic diseases. There's going to be a heightened risk where things like the access to food and diesel are absolutely going to impact people. Something else of note when we talk about the trucks and transportation, we are also seeing higher cancer incidence rates in communities alongside the Alameda corridor, the 710, the 110 freeway. And it's no surprise that your communities with poorer families and such are just at greater risk. And so ways that we can electrify and get diesel off the road, looking at other toxins in the air, looking at addressing fracking in local communities right up the street from where I live, La Cienega, with there's definitely Los Angeles has a long history of fracking that we're moving away from in California in general. And as these mandates are encouraging and incentives are encouraging other opportunities and choices, we know that California is a national leader. And so what we do will matter, not only in our communities, in our state, in our nation, but globally as well.
Right. You hit on so many different things, and you bring up another milestone that happened this year, even during the pandemic, is that the governor, through another executive order, after a Senate bill 467 installed, and that was about banning fracking, and also for community setbacks from oil extraction areas. So the governor was able to do an executive order to put a ban into place for 24 for certain fracking, and then additional fracking bans going forward, and that's being worked out by CalGen.
Mhm.
And that's a development that is really a game changer, because it's also helped local communities like in Los Angeles, you said from your experience, in Los Angeles County and LA City, they're working on making sure that oil extraction, it also has setbacks and becomes incompatible land uses, and also phasing it out, and natural gas also, their storage facilities, phasing those out. These are all plans to move beyond fossil fuels. And it's very exciting because California is not only leading the world, but the United States. And we allow so much to go on until we find ways to get new solutions.
Right.
So the last bit still needs to be done, because if you're looking at the numbers and what's come out in Cal EPA and CARB's new carbon neutrality study by 2045, is that yes, we are moving towards zero emissions, but it's still 10, 20, 30 and more years away. And even as it ratchets down, we're still having to use fossil fuels. So the Healthy Air Alliance is looking at alternative fuels to displace gasoline. And these are under the low carbon fuel standards. And that was created in the same breath as AB 32, the
Mhm.
Climate Solution Act. And that was by Fran Pavley, who also created
Right.
the 1007 alternative fuels to look at ways, because it's a multi-pronged approach to reducing our dependency on fossil fuels. So anything that lowers the carbon intensity of our fuel supply based on gasoline emissions helps clean the air. So we are excited that CARB is going to be looking at updating its fuel regulations so that we have more choice at the pump to reduce. So if you're not able to, for whatever reason, switch to an electric vehicle or hydrogen vehicle or some fuel cell, you can still choose a lower emission fuel to use in your gas tank. So you displace the gasoline and reduce the emissions. So all these will move towards carbon neutrality by 2045. And so I was hoping that you had additional insight on what more we can do now to clean our air.
Well, certainly, raising awareness of the issue is always up first, and understanding these are nonpartisan conversations. This is about health. This is about our community. This is about our children. Encouraging people to engage in a low emission, zero emission practices in their homes, looking at some of the choices, the toxins that we expose ourselves within our homes, anything from household cleaners and such, to the cars we drive, to making good decisions about commuting. One of the lessons from the pandemic is how much we can accomplish without having to take 70 trips on the freeway in any given week. Making wiser decisions. So the sustainable choices we make, certainly the more profound decisions that we do relate to policy. So we encourage people to get involved in activism and advocacy on the environmental side, on the health side. This is a ripe time in California for progress. And so different ways, we have the Cancer Action Network, Healthy Air Alliance is connected to a lot of different advocacy groups as well. And so I think people making their own smart choices, but also getting involved in some of these larger issues will certainly get us in the right direction faster and save more lives.
Yeah, you're right. We have more ability to affect change if we work together, and we're always inviting groups who are working on similar issues to join the Healthy Air Alliance. I mentioned that the governor, the Cal EPA, CARB have all these plans, and it's really top down. And you talked about community involvement, Dan, and there are ways for ground truthing and organizing that are out there that people can become more aware of and hopefully get more involved in. And that is the Community Air Protection Plan, also known as AB 617. Dan, you've had some experience talking with these groups about health equity. Can you explain a little bit more about what this process will mean for communities throughout California?
Right. Well, AB 617 was put into place to really address disproportional impact in communities by air toxins and the like, and the way that American Cancer Society understands the correlation of healthy lives and clean air and choices that we can make together. So there are different communities that have been determined through the air quality management districts throughout the state. We've been engaged with the South Coast as well as Sacramento in having conversations, and oftentimes we're speaking with groups that are representative of faith groups, African American, Latinx, Asian American, AAPI, and the like, because these are real people in communities that are suffering, that are looking for greater solutions. And so helping to really understand, either from geomapping, which shows us evidence on the ground, street by street, where different types of cancer incidents and different pollution contributions are taking place, will help us to really get a better grasp of what we're looking at, so that it's not just assumed or kind of blown away, but there are some real challenges that we're facing. And we know that California is limited from a federal and state and local perspective on funding available to do these types of activities. There's a lot more communities that want to be part of AB 617 so that they can have more of these discussions and learn actions that they can take. And in the meantime, the best we can do is engage through the process, through our air quality management districts, and then reach out. And hopefully we can have as many influencers as possible reaching all the communities. Health equity is a top issue at American Cancer Society, in understanding that people have disproportional impact on their health for various reasons. And at the very basic minimum, we have to address them sooner where they're suffering the most pain. And then we can take a step back. But we're not going to wait 10 years to help certain communities, because statistics are moving in the right direction regardless of them. Everybody matters, every life matters. And that's why some of these policies are in place to fix some of the equity challenges that have been endemic in California for a lot of historic undertones in racist real estate policy decisions and otherwise. So these are really the realities that we are looking to address.
Yeah, they seem to be really tangible results as well, as far as putting together the plans that are needed. I have seen that Clean Air Month really helps build awareness, but these AB 617s are doing something more, which is they're collecting the data through air monitoring systems. And you can't regulate something that you can't measure. So that's a double negative. I apologize for it. So measure it, regulate it, clean the air. And they're getting air monitoring systems out there. So it's citizen scientists working with agency professionals, putting monitors out there, collecting the data, understanding where the pollution sources are at the street level in communities. The community members are putting together emission reduction plans in their community, getting the CARB agency and to certify it and to buy into it and fund it and give the local communities the power to implement with the local air quality management districts. One of the things you mentioned, the South Coast Air Quality Management District, they recently passed regulations on indirect sources of pollution from warehouses and what have you, to measure it and to make sure that warehouses are held accountable for pollution that they've indirectly generated. So these things are ways to, again, put land use in the hands of the community for cleaning the air. And it's very exciting. And hopefully bills like that in the state legislature that will give other air quality management districts that same authority to be able to look at what is generating transportation pollution that you said has a high correlation with health outcomes. As we have these sources of pollution, we need to have the mitigations in place so that we don't expand our economy without first thinking about the health of the community. And that's also other legislation out there by Assemblywoman Christina Garcia, AB 713. So as CARB and Cal EPA put together these 5-year plans to maximize the amount of technology that they're requiring to be used to reduce air pollution, they also explain what the health benefits are, because I've seen various numbers out there, but with saving lives comes saving money too, billions and billions of dollars out there in health costs. But of course, it's the quality of life, the suffering of people, the injustice of the disproportionate that needs to be taken into consideration. But we need to measure all these things so that people are more aware. And that's the idea of Clean Air Month, is make people more aware, understand what the different factors are out there so they can act and they can put the political pressure for good policy.
Right. And certainly, it all goes down to an ounce of prevention is cheaper than a pound of cure. And when we talk about Clean Air Month and all of the policy conversations that you're having, similar to all the prevention, early detection, people may perceive them as costs, but you're absolutely right. The cost on the back end of disease, the loss of productivity when you have your workforce that's sick, in such large numbers, the true costs of what we're paying right now are astronomical. And so some of these investments we're making in our industries, new industries, emergent industries that will improve this will absolutely save a lot of money for California. For those that might be nervous that these policies are putting us in the wrong direction, when we know that with the aging of America, the rising health costs, we're going to be ultimately saving a whole lot of money that we can reinvest in our economy by making the right choices with healthy air and healthy communities.
And that's the concept of just transition. So it's the idea that we have to have a plan for all people whose jobs and income depend on the current system out there that's heavily based on fossil fuels. As we move to zero, which it may or may not be inevitable, if people ignore the need to get these people into new jobs, into green jobs, or adjusting the economy so that there's new opportunity for people to be trained and to be participating in. If we don't have that, then we'll have this transition and a lot of people will be left worse off. And that is not the ideal situation. So I know that's outside a lot of our scopes. That's on the labor side, that's the workforce side, that's the economic investment. But again, you have to have the economics in place so that we can have the transition to a zero emission economy through a variety of electrical, hydrogen, and also alternative fuels that have innovations in them, so that all the approach above gives us the carbon neutrality that we're looking for by 2045.
Right.
Great. Well, Dan, I know Clean Air Month is almost over. Memorial Day's here. We're going to be remembering those who have sacrificed so much for our country. But that we also, as we go out of Clean Air Month, we have to remember all those people who have suffered from air pollution and whose lives we have lost because of air pollution, and understand that we can do more. And it makes sense both for community health, for economic reasons, and for the life of the planet that we live on.
That sounds
So
good.
Dan, do you have any last thoughts you want people to know about the American Cancer Society's work?
Well, certainly, appreciating the conversation. American Cancer Society coming out of the pandemic, we're encouraging people to re-engage with their health. In many ways, people were either unable or chose not to go to doctor's appointments or make some of the decisions that are pro-health. We talk about early detection, getting their cancer screenings. Certainly, we are advocating for people to get their COVID-19 vaccinations, and it all relates to living healthier lives and making healthy choices. And certainly, as people get back on the road, to be mindful of what the impact is of what they're doing, and not to litter, and to use less toxins, and to really help bring California to a healthier place, because we know that our lives depend on it.
Thank you, Dan. And yes, please join us at healthyairalliance.org to learn more about how we can increase these choices that Dan outlined, so that we can reduce our use of fossil fuels and dependency on fossil fuels, and create a regulatory process for innovations, for new solutions, to make it so that we have these choices available to all Californians, and the investments needed to implement these changes. Dan, I hope you have a great rest of your day, the rest of Clean Air Month, and that we keep working together. It's been really helpful for us to have your resources on showing the correlation between air pollution and health outcomes, and working throughout California to explain to people so that they can also pass that message along. So everybody out there, thank you for listening, and hopefully you have additional information now to talk to people about what they can do to clean the air in their neighborhoods.
Thank you, Jim. Have a great Memorial Day. Take care,
You
everyone.
too. Bye, Dan.